everybody for our October event, which is Sharpening Your Project Management Axe. This is presented by Nick Duffield, who's got lots of experience. He'll talk about their tool, Harper Consulting. It's called Mind Mapping. I was very impressed when I heard him, so I have invited him to talk today on Sharpening Your Project Management Axe. I hope you enjoy this talk. I won't keep you too long now, so enjoy. Over to you, Nick.
There we go. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was on mute, of course. Thank you for that introduction. Good evening, everybody. I'm Nick Duffield, and I'll explain a bit more about who I am and why I'm here just now. But just first to say thank you for the invitation to present to you. It's very exciting to take the stuff I do out to other business areas and to other disciplines. Tonight I'm going to... Sorry, say again. Okay. Tonight I'm going to talk about, the title of the talk is Sharpening a Project Management Axe, and it's about everything around project management rather than project management itself, but we do link it to project management. I started writing software in 1978, go back as far as that. The first software I ever wrote was software for controlling weaving looms. So if you ever had woven name tapes in your school uniforms, going back a long time now, it was probably me that wrote the software that did that. We had 8-bit microprocessor controlling 4 looms simultaneously, and it was all done with 1 kilobyte of memory, written in assembler code. And technology has changed, and so many things have changed over the years now. But one thing that doesn't really change is what I learned from that, which is that discipline and preparation are the foundation for anything, really. And that's what this talk is about. It's the idea is that if you've got a job to do, you're better off spending time at the start being prepared and being organized than trying to catch up at the end. What I'm going to do is I've just used a couple of slides here, but I'm now going to switch to a piece of software to show you go through the rest of the talk and show you some of the things I'm talking about. Now, this isn't a software demo, so we're not going to look at what the software does from a functional point of view. If you can sort of take it as granted that the software exists, and what we're talking about is what it can actually do in a meaningful way for your project work. Let's shut this down. And this is the agenda that we've got for this evening. Reading from top to bottom, we're going to look at what's changing and what stays the same, what long-term challenges for project managers, and then talk about visualization, about drawing pictures rather than having text and having words. And the important part of that is not the picture, it's the process of putting it together is where the value comes from. We'll look at that in some more detail. Then I'm going to go particularly into mind mapping software. Now, some of you may have seen mind mapping software. You may know about mind mapping. You might be power users of it. You might have heard about it just in the context of brainstorming or working at school, that kind of thing. But you'll get an idea from the stuff we'll look at tonight about what modern software can do, how far it actually goes now. Then we'll look at a couple of different types of diagram that you can use to communicate the softer side of project management and project strategy, both 2D diagrams, block diagrams, and trees. Then we'll look at how you can utilize this to try and get in a good starting position before you actually start your project. And I'll show you some examples of how the software is used both around a project and within project management as well. So I'm going to use software rather than PowerPoint slides. I don't know if any of you read the report after the Challenger shuttle disaster about death by PowerPoint. That became quite a literal thing after Challenger shuttle, and that's an interesting read. They looked at how the misuse of PowerPoint actually had pretty dramatic consequences. So we're looking at communication, really. If I fail to communicate, then this whole thing falls over, and we're looking at communicating more than just a plan. In a project, the plan and the tasks are near the center. They're driven by requirements. Then there's something around the outside. There's something that shapes all of that, that is expressed in requirements, but in some ways that's like a couple talking to each other through their pet. Everyone talks in terms of user needs and requirements. There's some stuff that happens outside of that, which is to do with strategic direction, dealing with the unknown, working in an area where you're not in control. And those are the kinds of things we'll be looking at this afternoon. Now, there's tons of references to working ahead of the game and preparing. Stephen Covey talks about sharpening the saw in one of the chapters of his famous book. And learning organization, Peter Senge is another famous one. There's lots of references for this. Basically, a project is a risk transfer agreement, project contract. So if a stakeholder asks you to complete a project, in an ideal world, they're handing off to you. They know that there's a lot of unknown here. There's a lot of risk. Not only can things go wrong through mistakes, but they can go wrong through unexpected events. And they want to hand that over to you, call it a project, and then pester you for when you've finished. When is it ready yet? Is it done yet? Why isn't it done yet? That kind of thing. So a project contract is a risk transfer. And what we're looking at is how visualization can be used to help you prepare for that situation, give you better insights into the project management, and critically to communicate those and explain those to people. I'm using the software just to dig into different parts of this map. The whole document that we're looking at is quite large, but I'm just zooming in and expanding bits. So hopefully you can see what context we're in at any one point. And then as we dig in, we can explore more detail. First thing, of course, is infinite amounts of information. You can find advice and how-tos and information on anything you want to do, but there's really no time to take all of it in. So we can assume that information is pretty much infinite. Second thing that always happens in project is the project starts and straight away people want to know what's happening. They want a quick result. The salesperson wants to go back to the client and say, we're doing really well, we've done this much so far. And that's one pressure, that's one direction that people are pushed in. From the other side, there's plenty of advice to say, invest early in design, not in trying to patch up later. And many of you may have come across Edward Deming, very famous name in quality circles, and he's considered the father of modern quality. And what he's very clear about that you should be spending less time and less effort at each phase in a project as it proceeds, not more time and more effort. So the beginning of the project is a critical part. And then we have stakeholders. The world will be a wonderful place without customers, without stakeholders. You cannot suppress their optimism. Everybody is optimistic. They can't imagine how this could possibly go wrong. But you're not actually in control of that. Lots of other things can affect it. So you can set up your project, have it well planned, and then something else happens that you really didn't expect, you didn't see coming. You've got to take into account changing regulations, environmental GDPR. You've got to comply with policy standards. the technology can move while you're looking at it. It can change really fast. So something from 2 years ago that seemed like a great idea might already be eclipsed. Organizations change. And of course, there's lots of politics. People you're dealing with might have personal ambitions, personnel change. So the person who maybe started the project and has taken care of it, the customer side moves on and somebody else has a completely different view. So there's lots of things that come from the different project stakeholders. And one area that is perhaps is tied up with project management, and it's not obvious. And forgive me if this is already very familiar to you, but it's the difference between complicated and complex. And I frequently see those two words used interchangeably. People talk about complicated when they mean complex and vice versa. Complicated it's knowable. You know what you know what you don't know. You can analyze and you can break down, you can categorize and organize, and you can get there in the end. So a machine is complicated. It's understandable. You can dismantle it and find out what it's really doing and fix it. So the dimension with complicated is a lot of detail. Simple things, trivial things, we don't have to worry about. Something that's complicated is just large scale, but you can understand it. By contrast, complex is something that works on interactions. So you have A affects B, B affects C, C affects A, and you change one thing and something else happens altogether. So the weather system is an example of something complex. You can't control it. You can't really understand it. You can try to model it. You can't solve it, but you can manage it. And that's the difference between complicated and complex. Complicated you could deal with process. Complex you deal with by management. This has been well described by Dave Snowden in the Canavan. It's a difficult word to pronounce. It's a Welsh word, Canavan framework. This breaks the world down into 4 different situations you may find yourself in. Simple, you can deal with best practice and with rules. Complicated things, good practice. Complex, you have to do trial and error. You have to make tests, make a trial, see what happens, and then change what you're going to do. And then the last one is chaotic, which is where nobody is in control. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. And Snowden's thesis is that simple things, if you get too confident and too much hubris, they can tip over into chaotic really fast. Something that seemed to be working one day can suddenly collapse. That's one way to visualize it. Another way would be as a little spiral staircase. So this is from chaotic all the way up the stairs up to simple rules-based. So rather than 4 quadrants, we think of this as a continuum, and the stairs are greasy. You slide down them really easily and the gravity is trying to pull you down. It's trying to pull you towards the complex and the chaotic. So unattended, simple things start to get more complicated. That's just the way the world works. And it takes effort to climb back up, to try and get back up to the top. But you can fall off the top down to the bottom, down to the chaotic. So that's another way of thinking about this kind of an scheme. And how you respond to a situation is determined by what quadrant you're in, where you find yourself. Now, most project management tools tend to treat project management as complicated, and really it's complex. You're dealing with something you can't necessarily control. You can control parts of it, but you can't control all of it. And that I see more and more software tools, especially task management tools, pointing people towards working in a complicated environment and really ignoring the complex side of things, the relationship side of things. But if we go back and look at again at Edwards Deeming, he has a system of profound knowledge, which he says are the 4 really the 4 skills that any manager needs to be successful. And the first one is to appreciate when systems are enforced rather than just processes and just complicated things. If you understand that you're working in a system where changing one thing has a completely unexpected response, that's really going to help. Second thing he thinks is important is understanding the difference between common and special causes of variation. So it's normal for things to vary. It's normal to get a range of results. It's normal for some things to go wrong. You have to be able to tell when that's within normal range or whether something that really needs your attention has happened. And it's common to treat special causes as if they were common and vice versa, and try and continually fix things when actually they're in the normal range of variation anyway. And that's reflected in statistical control, which is more to do with quality management. But again, if people understand that things do vary, you do get errors, you do get variations, you don't need to press the panic button every time, then that helps. And the last one is understanding how to work with people. So that's his system of profound knowledge. That was developed in the 1950s or even earlier. So that goes back quite a long time. That's still a foundation that is still useful. So of course, there's plenty of silver bullets around. Methodologies. Methodologies are, they're really designed to improve control. But as we saw with the little spiral staircase model, there's a cost in that. There's a cost in trying to climb up and get out of a complex into a complicated situation. And unless the methodology is balanced with the risk that it's controlling, there's a danger of taking that too far. So applying a methodology when you didn't really need that, when you could take the risk on normal variation. And shiny technologies. Technologies inevitably they tend to lead us towards what the tools are good at. So technology is much easier to sell than ideas and principles, and mostly they focus on an aspect of project management that is capable of automation. So there are lots and lots of tools for tracking tasks. There's far fewer tools for creating a project strategy. It's easy to do the task management side of it. That's where technology tends to pull us. The question we all get is, when will it be finished? As soon as any project starts, people need to know, they want to know, is it on time? But you're being asked to forecast something you can't control. So you're being asked to make a forecast in an environment where things can happen that are outside of your control. So what the weather forecasters do, more in the States than here, they say, under the same conditions in the past, it rained 10% of the time, or we had snow 30% of the time, or whatever it was. And so they're transferring that information back to you. It's up to you what chance you take, whether you go out without a raincoat or not. That's up to you to judge that. And what the same conditions mean in your project is a key to being able to do that. So being able to recognize when a project is at risk, not going well, going well, you're feeling confident about it, understanding what those same conditions are would enable you to say, well, last project under these similar conditions, we were 6 months late, or last project under similar conditions, we actually finished early. And you can transfer that interpretation back to the person who's asking. But that's what you're dealing with there. So to summarize that, project management is really the management of a complex system, not a complicated administration. And you're going to need to master and communicate both that big picture around the project as well as all the detail inside it. And that's the kind of thing that we can do with modern visualization tools. Let's have a quick look at visualization. I'm showing you little diagrams here, and we'll look at some different types in a minute. The key thing is it's creating the diagram where the value comes from, not the diagram itself. So if you're able to draw a picture of your ideas and your concepts, that is going to help you just as much, if not more, than the person you're explaining to. And there's lots of references to this. So the old adage, if you want to really understand something, you explain it to somebody else, you teach it to somebody else. If you can get something in a picture as opposed to words, you can much more easily see patterns and gaps, you can see perspectives. So if somebody gave you, as an example, a picture of a busy, written description of a busy road junction, it would be really hard to work out from that description what's actually going on. But if you had a picture of it, you could spot straight away what's going on, whether it's a good design or a complete mess, what's about to happen, what the risks are. You could see that really fast. We're much better at interpreting pictures, spatial pictures, than we are in words. Now, of course, people can tell lies with pictures, they can tell lies with graphs, just the same as you can with words. But most of the time, it's clearer to see where the gaps are, what you've got and what you haven't got, how things fit together. So being able to draw something in a picture leads to a lot of benefits. And that is really the same principle as plans being worthless, but planning is essential. It's the planning process that generates the value. The plan itself is just a snapshot, and that can change at any moment. So visualization gives us a wider vocabulary for describing things, especially describing relationships. And you can see that topic there, visualizations, our vocabulary, is connected in some way with this one, with its parent, which is in the context of this one. So just in this diagram, we're building a lot of information about context and where things belong and what the big parts and what the small parts are. We can see that visually without needing to explain that. I'm now going to talk about verticals and horizontals. By verticals, I mean direct representation of data. So things like Gantt charts, dashboards, processes, work breakdown structures, they're kind of diagrams that we can recognize pretty easily. By the horizontals, I mean softer stuff like systems and strategy. It can be really difficult to know how to represent those visually. But what we can do is we can learn a lot from business management models and look at how strategy and softer subjects like that are represented in business management and bring some of that into project management. So as mentioned, we're using a piece of software here, which is a piece of mind mapping software. And I'll talk a bit about how that evolved, where it's come from and where it's gone to. It started, or I didn't see mind mapping software until probably about 96 or 97, something like that. So it goes back quite a way. And the first products were just dire, they were awful. The graphics simply weren't up to the job. And then it's picked up and it's accelerated. But what's interesting is although the technology around it has changed a lot, the principles have hardly changed at all from the very beginning. So in the beginning, you might have heard of a guy called Tony Buzan, who popularized mind mapping, and it started as a note-taking technique on paper, note-taking and memorization. Very successful for studying for exams, revising for exams, very successful taking minutes or taking notes in a lecture. And it was positioned as a tool to help people learn. That's where it started. And then in the 90s, somebody thought, why don't we do this in software? Like many technologies do. Technologists look at something and say, I could automate that. And sometimes they completely miss the point of the original system, and they just automate it and it loses a lot of character. But what happened with mind mapping was by going from a single sheet of paper to being able to put it on a screen where you're looking at a small part of what might be a very big canvas, a very big space to work in. You can suddenly do things that you couldn't have done before, couldn't have done on a single sheet of paper. So we can now deal with very large amounts of information, and we can have a lot of information and lots of different ways to find it, to filter it, sort it, export it, to process it in any way you can think. So it becomes almost like a visual database. It's not a relational database, but you've got lots of different ways to view the same information, in much the same way as you would with a database. And because it's software, we can move stuff. So if I just click on this branch here and drag it and drop it to that one, it's a small change, but actually it's quite a profound change too, because I changed the meaning of that branch when I moved it. When I moved it to a different place, it means something different. And there's not many pieces of software that can actually do that, that can give you that flexibility. And what it becomes is, it becomes an extension of your thinking. Once you've got past the sort of first lump of dealing with a new piece of software and getting over the concepts of it, when you can use it as quickly as you think, it becomes an extension of your thinking. So you're explaining something to the computer, it's explaining it back and saying, is that what you meant? No, that's not what I meant. Actually, what I meant was that needs to be over here. That belongs better there. So I'm going to move it there. That's something that's really hard to do on paper. That was something that was never envisaged in the original concept of mind mapping. But the mutability, the flexibility that software gives you makes it a creative process. So you can go from a mess, and you can gradually rebuild that into something that means something to you, that makes sense to you, and may make sense to other people as well. So mind maps changed in software from being personal to the idea about whether they're right or not. It didn't matter when it was personal whether it was right or not. It may matter now if you're using a piece of software to describe a piece of work in an organization. Other people need to understand it, need to agree with it. Then you've moved to a place where it matters whether it makes sense, whether it's right or not. So the software gives you the ability to continually migrate towards that picture. So the value generation changed from being a personal learning technique to something that is part of a dialogue, part of helping explain, part of other people understanding what your intentions are, other people understanding what your point of view is, and you can start capturing this in flexible diagrams. So then it started to expand vertically to support things like information management. So this pink blob here, this pink topic here, has got a lot of other stuff attached to it. And I said I wasn't going to do a product demo, but what I can say we've got here is we've got an item in the map that we can move around, we can position where we want to, and it carries a lot of other stuff with it. So we've got some properties, we've got some calculation going on, we've got notes, attachments, comments, formulas that are processing the numbers in there. We've got task information, we've got cost information, we've got schedule information. We've got a ton of detail that belongs to this particular object, whatever it might be. So that means that you can have a picture where some of it is informational and some of it is action oriented, it's task oriented. We can code up our pictures with task information. So that there was a lot of work, and most of the software packages have this kind of feature that you can add a lot more detail, a lot of flexible detail to any item in a map. At the same time, they've also expanded horizontally away from trees. So we can now, as well as doing hierarchies of trees, and this picture we're looking at here is a tree, we can index that, we can view it as timelines, we can turn it into Gantt charts, we can view it as tables, and we can draw other topologies. So we can draw flowcharts, block diagrams, and I'll show you some of this now. But what it gives us is a space to work in where you're not limited to one type of visualization, one type of diagram. You can express your ideas, you can build ideas in any way that's really suited to what it is that you're trying to do. trees are special things. They're different to all the other types of diagram. They can be really fast to create, but it's really hard to show systems, to show processes. They tend to show breakdown, deconstruction, analysis. They're perfect for doing that. They're not good for showing relationships and for showing sequence that well, but they're very fast. You can create a tree as quickly as you can think of it. So let's have a look at some examples of these types of visualization. We'll start with block diagrams and networks. And here we want to represent a system of some sort. We want to show relationships. I'll give you a few examples here. Start with an influence diagram, and the obvious subject for an influence diagram is project management. This is our project triangle. And we've written in 3 items here: scope, resources, and time. And what we're showing in this picture is that the shark in the middle can change any of those. And if you breach the constraints, you're constrained with scope, resources, and time, then your project is going to start suffering problems. So if the scope increases, if the customer adds new requirements or changes their mind so that the resources are increased, then that goes up. And what you saw just happen there was an automatic rule in the diagram that said, if it's above that red line, we'll color it red. And what you can do with these pictures now is not just draw a static picture. You can have an animated picture. You can have a picture that connects with real data, that uses actual numbers, and that gives you much more of a dashboard rather than just a static picture. And in this particular instance, we have an unstable system, and we can see that from the way the objects influence each other. There's no automatic compensation going on here. There's no stabilization. It's inherently unstable. When it starts going wrong, it gets worse, and every project manager has got that experience. But the reason that we live with this is that this is a modern jet fighter. Modern jet fighters are inherently unstable. They don't glide nicely if you take your hand off the controls. There's a computer keeping it stable for you all the time. And the reason for that is that an inherently unstable system that's under control can act and react much quicker. It's much more agile than an inherently stable system that corrects itself. And that's something that project managers have to take advantage of in their project. You have to take advantage of opportunities and things that happen, risks that come through, change direction of the project, but maybe that opens a door as well as closing one, and you can regroup to go in a different direction. So unstable systems are harder to work with, but they perform better overall, and that's why we live with projects as a discipline. So what's happening in this diagram here, if I zoom back a bit so we can see the whole thing, just expand that, is we've got a canvas with a soft diagram, a 2-dimensional system diagram on one side. And on the right hand side, we've got a tree of breakdown of detail. And what this enables us to do is have 2 different views of the same thing in the same picture. So if you want to explain it as a system, you can discuss this diagram on the left. If you want to break down the detail and have text and other data and other information nicely organized in groups so you can find it all and you can summarize it all, you can draw the same thing as a tree. You can break it down as a tree. And you can see that on the left, this type of diagram, 2D diagram, it's hard to add more and more detail to. If you try and add more detail to it, it becomes unworkable. And on the right, this type of breakdown as a tree doesn't really show you the relationships. It doesn't give you a sense of the thing as an interacting system. It just gives you a list of the parts, and it's useful to have both. If I go back to the presentation map, I've got a picture of that on the left-hand side. On the left-hand side of our presentation map, we've got a picture of all the factors in a project that can influence each other, and this is what makes it an unstable system that has to be managed. And we can look at that in two ways. We can either look at that holistically, or we can look at it as a breakdown of detail. Holistically, we're interested in relationships, what influence, how do we manage that? What strategy do we need to cope with that? In the detail, we want to know the numbers, the breakdown, plans, tasks, KPIs. But the detail is only useful in the context of a bigger picture. So this is what we're looking at just now with the influence diagram. We have a system, a representation of a system on the left and a breakdown on the right, and we can go either way. We can dig into the detail when we want to, or we can view it as a system when we need to. Reorientate myself again. Let's look at how you draw strategies. We looked at an influence diagram there. How would you communicate a strategy? Here's one way, and this is a Kaplan and Norton strategy map. Again, drawn with my mapping software, picture on the left, a tree on the right, a tree of all the detail. And for those who've not seen Kaplan and Norton strategy maps, what you do is you draw a frame, you divide it into 4 sections, which represent different aspects of your organization. Learning and growth, how the organization is developing, what skills people are learning, and what capital you're building up, what processes you use, what the methods and the skills and the processes are inside your organization, what the customer sees, what the customer needs and wants and receives and values. And at the top, because this is an organization that's assumed to be commercial, we have a financial perspective as well. So what the effect of the strategy and operations are on the business financially. And what Kaplan and Norton suggest is that you write in strategic outcomes, you aim at doing certain things, and you show what the relationships are, you show how they affect each other. So this is a bit like an influence diagram, but this is called a strategy map. What it enables you to do is to say from anywhere, whatever people are doing, they can see how they contribute to the overall strategy and health of the business. And you recognize these 4 sections from the balanced scorecard approach as well. Balanced scorecard is a different aspect of this, but this is a Kaplan and Norton strategy map. So you could apply this model to a project strategy. You could show how a project is strategic for your organization, or how the project has its own strategy to defend itself against the unknown. And you can have a picture here, and you can break it down into all the details that you want to on the right hand side. So if you want to say, here we've got a particular initiative on the right hand side, we can actually break that down into a plan and actually do something about it and keep track of what we're doing about it. Another way to do that would be to steal the business model canvas. This is a well-known business model, and it looks at different aspects of an operational system, a business as a system, and divides it up into a number of key areas. So we could draw that framework, and we could put in there key things like requirements, or managing communications, or managing status reports or project ceremonies. And again, we can have a tree on the same canvas that actually gives us all the detail of that, breaks that down. So that's a quick look at drawing some strategies. We could draw processes. Here's a flow chart. So this is a flow chart for an agile process. So this shows you the sequence of running sprints, completing them, doing the demos, accepting them, looping around, and somehow getting from the start to the end after a number of iterations. So this flow chart shows you iterations. It shows you the dependencies between the elements of an agile approach or a Scrum approach. And again, on the right-hand side, we could actually detail what's happening in the project against that. And I'll show you another example of that in a minute. So here we have a picture which you can talk to the people who are interested in the detail. You can say, well, over here, we're doing this, this, and this, and this is how far we got. You can talk to the team to say, this is the way we're doing it. This is why you'll be asked to do things in a certain order and how you'll do them. So we could develop this in two directions at once. We have the big picture of the process, and we have the detail of a project plan as well. We could draw block diagrams. Well, I won't spend long on this, but you could draw a block diagram of a system and show how the parts fit together, and then break that down into more detail. So block diagrams are another way to explain things. And there's a few other lower level analytical tools that we could use. And again, they're really useful visualizations. So many of you will have seen a risk matrix. We could draw a risk matrix, and we could use some animation or some coding to help us manage risks and position risks. But the little grid of saying, we really need to be looking at risk 1 and 2 here, because they're the high likelihood, high impact ones. Those are the ones to be paying attention to. We're comfortable with these other ones as within our risk appetite. But again, a short and simple graphic, goes a long way to explaining something, especially to senior levels, than it would having them in a spreadsheet. And a Venn diagram is another popular way to explain how things fit together. Again, it's a very visual way to do that, and all these things are possible. So those are some of the other types of diagram that mind mapping software can draw. But the thing to remember is that a network diagram or a block diagram can't really be translated into other formats. It's not that easy to turn a network diagram into a linear document or into another report. The diagram is the way to understand that. Let's have a look at what we could do with trees now. We're using trees here, and the objective here is to deal with lots of detail. So a lot of detail is necessary but not sufficient, and it's not a substitute for a systems level understanding of what's happening in your project, but you can't live without it. It's going to get you in the end. The kind of things we can do with trees or with hierarchies are managing requirements. We can easily describe requirements and break them down into the detail that you need. So you can have high level objectives, you can break those down into requirements, you can break the requirements down into elements. And I did a talk a little while ago about using a requirements system called EARS. It's a very simple way to describe requirements in natural language, which is it's an interesting alternative for less formal projects. If people are interested in that, I can find the link to that. Work breakdown structure obviously drops straight into trees, into a hierarchy. The work breakdown structure, very well known to most project managers. It's the foundation of a large and complex or complicated project bid. You break it down into packages, deliverables, and we can very easily draw that as a tree, and it makes a lot of sense as a tree. We can break down from our projects into deliverables, work packages, and the work packages can then break down into actions, and we can represent that visually and manage it visually as well. So instead of having a separate document with your work breakdown structure in it and then spreadsheet somewhere else, we can bring that into a single picture. Schedules and Gantt charts. This is the Gantt chart, and I'll come back to it, that the MindManager software can produce. So the MindManager software has got the ability to turn a visual map into a Gantt chart. Let's actually do that rather than just showing you screenshots. So here we've got a project that's been broken down into a number of different phases. The project is to develop a new LED torch. We split that up into prototype, production and marketing. And under prototype, we've split that up into a number of steps. And in each step, we've identified a number of tasks that we can do. So it's a step breaking down from the top of the project down to the detail. We've got individual tasks to be done here, and we can connect them together with these relationships as dependencies. So we can say that task can't start until that one's finished. So we've now got enough information. We've got duration, we can have resources, we've got dependencies on there, and we can go to the task tab and click on show the Gantt chart, and that converts this visual map into a Gantt chart. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of what what's in this Gantt chart. The important thing is that this Gantt chart has been extracted from what may be a much bigger picture of a project, but in the same workspace. So if you go to project management software, you can certainly put in your schedule, you can put in all your task information, you can produce Gantt charts. There's a large amount of stuff you can do, but there's probably not a space in your project management software to describe the project strategy. There's probably not a space for stuff you haven't really decided about yet, might happen, might not, might be a decision we need to make in the future. There might not be much space in some of them for managing risks, to say this is a really critical part of our project we need to be focusing on here and communicating that stuff. So what we have with this type of mind mapping software is the ability to make all those descriptions and have a project schedule in the context of that stuff. And then we can zoom in and just look at the Gantt chart if we need to do that. We need to close some stuff here. Let me close a few tabs and I'll be back in control again. Here we are. So that's a type of tabular information. Cost analysis is another thing we could do. We can treat a diagram as a spreadsheet. And in this little project here, this is a project to move offices. Not only have we split it down into a schedule, so we can go to the Gantt chart and see this is the schedule for our project to move an office. We've actually got cost information in there as well. And because it's a hierarchy, we can easily roll that stuff up. So it's like a two-dimensional spreadsheet, if you like. We've got cost information that has been calculated from durations and cost per resource. That's all being added up and it rolls up. So at the very top of the tree, if I zoom in, you can see we've got a total figure for the project. And that breaks down into totals for the next level down, and we can carry on breaking it down. And that's a really good way to spot where you've got hotspots in a project or in a budget. It might be that one part of your budget is 10 times bigger than it really ought to be in comparison with the others, and you can zoom in on that stuff. And it's an easy way to be able to give headlines and give summary reports. So if you're presenting this summarizing this for senior management, they may need to know no more detail than that. And that's easier than just pointing out one cell in a big spreadsheet. You can cut down what's visible, what's exposed, and just say, this is our summary. We're not happy with that 20K cost. Let's drill in and see what that's made up of and resolve that. Last thing I want to show here is risk management. Here, what we've got in the picture is we've got a breakdown of a project, a tree like a WBS, as we looked at before. And earlier on, we talked about the kind of information that you can add to topics or to items in a map like this. And here we're using some numbers, some custom data, and some calculations to work with risk. So we're able to pinpoint one item in the picture, give it a risk likelihood and a risk impact score, it calculates the severity for us, and then it brackets those severities, and it can give us a summary at the top of the map to say half of the risks are high severity in the project, and we've lit them up red just so that you don't fail to notice them. So here we can have one structure which gives you a visual overview of a project, and inside that we can pick out things that need attention. So just we could go through the project and do a review of each of the items to say we're happy with that. That looks dodgy, we need to take action there. And then that gives us a little dashboard, a risk dashboard of the project. And that can be overlaid on top of these other things that we talked about, the strategy, the planning, the schedule, all the detail, the requirements, all of that stuff can be shown in one picture, and you can just draw out the part that you need to. So that's using some formulas, some custom data, and it's very flexible. You can define that to work as you wish. The advantage of trees is that you can convert them into other formats. So we can easily convert trees into linear documents, or we can filter them just to see the part that we want. So we can have a lot of information encoded in a tree, and we can change the view to just see the parts that we need to see. So how do we put this together? How do we get from A to B and do something useful? Returning to project strategy again, sometimes people ask about the difference between strategy and a plan. A plan is what you do when you're in control. A strategy is what you do when you've lost control, when the totally unexpected happens. So some of the things that you might be able to do to have a project strategy, of course, you can have a cushion. You could say, we won't tell the customer, well, we've got 30% spare in here just in case things go wrong. And that tends to get, the cushions tend to get spent quite cheaply early in a project. It's probably important to try and protect those from day one, rather than wait until it really starts to run out, until it's been used up. You could have a policy of making sure you've got redundancy in the areas that are really going to be sensitive. It's a really good idea to have a theory of how your stakeholders are going to work, what they're likely to do, how they're likely to affect each other, what you think they might have not said yet that could be important, because that always happens. People will say, yeah, that's fine with me, until the rubber hits the road and they need to take an action or make a decision. Then suddenly things move a little bit. It's a good idea, as Deeming points out, to have an idea of what you're expected, your normal variations are going to be, what kind of things will go wrong in a project and what you can live with. Yeah, it's just a standard fare for projects. So in an ideal world, you're running enough projects that they balance each other out. Overall, you win. Individually, some you win and some you lose. And those are the expected variations. So being able to tell what we might describe as a normal project disaster from an exceptional project disaster that really needs a change in process is really useful. And communicating is obviously a part of it. Communicating is not just something that you do to plan. It actually changes the strategy of a project, getting people to understand both your perspective as well as you understanding theirs as well. And also how you're going to get improved processes in learning out of your project. And we'll talk about post-mortems in a moment, but these are things to try and plan strategically rather than after the fact. Next step will be to collect together everything you can, everything you know about your project, and things you don't know about your project as well, because you can start to build a framework into which stuff will fit in the future, and you can then categorize and organize that stuff, start to group it. And that's where that's the easy part, to be honest. It's being able to see what you haven't got and what you don't know that is more difficult. It's easier to work with stuff that you do have. And from there, you can start to develop a baseline schedule that then see how it shapes up against constraints. And that's something that is a snapshot. I think they always change in projects. They change because things happen that were outside of what you expected. They're outside of the ideal. And how you deal with those, you deal with those with core processes. So you really need ways to respond to things like a risk actually occurring, change, how you deal with change, how you deal with learning, how you actually get approval. And getting approval can be quite a challenge with some customers, to actually get them to agree that even though it wasn't what they had in their heads, this is what's going to work. This is where we are. There's a guy called Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who he's a really interesting person to read if you've ever read any of his books. He's got a book called Anti-Fragile, which is a good read. I think it ought to be required reading for project managers, because it's about taking advantage of chaotic situations, not just trying to defend yourself or escape from them or protect against them, but actually flying them like the unstable system of a modern fighter aircraft. You take advantage of when things go wrong. And his view is that people shouldn't be taught how to manage risk. They should be taught how to take risk, that you should have a good idea of what's acceptable, what you can fly by the seat of the pants with and get through. And that's probably what happens in a lot of projects, but would never be formally recognized. You know, it's difficult for people to formally say, actually, we were really lucky that time, we got away with it. You know, you tend to post-rationalize and say, well, it was down to our skills and our processes, of course, or when it goes wrong, it's somebody else's fault. But your risk management process is really, it's important as a part of project strategy. It's important as a way of dealing with unexpected things, so that you can cope with them in a formal way where people understand what's happened and what you need to do. So you start your risk management early, before the project starts. Always know what your biggest risks are and what you can do about them now, either to avoid them, to reduce the impact, or what you'll do if they just happen and you can't stop it happening. And the other thing to do is to start preparing your project post-mortem. What happens with a lot of project post-mortems is that people rationalize afterwards. They're always expert after the fact, but actually the story of your project post-mortem is already in your project information. It doesn't need to be re-understood later on. It's already part of the history of your project. So that should be something that feeds into process improvement. I've seen many project post-mortems where really it's been sort of cathartic for the project team. It's an opportunity to get everything off their chest and say, well, what should have happened is sales should have been much clearer, or we were too much pressure put on us, or this didn't work, or whatever. There's always an explanation. But actually what you're looking for is what you do with that. And if you haven't got processes that you can go back and improve for the next time, then those lessons never tend to get learned. They may get written up, they may get filed, but nobody has the time to go and read that stuff. You have to integrate it into what you actually do day to day. Let's we're nearly out of time, nearly up to time now. Let's have a quick look at a couple of worked examples. I'll show you an agile project in a single picture that captures the process, some aspects of strategy and strategic objective. It captures requirements and it captures the delivery plan. And all of that is based on a framework or a structure that's come from somewhere else. So this is a little GDPR compliance project, and the heat's gone out of that now. I believe that since Brexit, we're actually going to rewrite GDPR and have a UK version. But this was from a few years ago when GDPR was a hot topic. And at a high level, what we have on this canvas, in this diagram, is a picture of an agile process, of an agile way of delivering the project. So we can use that to explain and inform. There's details at each step. So there's a reference here for people who are working in the project to come back to see what the actual description of the process is. And then on the right hand side in the tree, what we have here is the whole of GDPR. And what we've done is taken a structure from somewhere else, that is the GDPR regulation, and that could be a different type of regulation, or an ISO standard or something like that. We've dropped it into a map, and then we've been through this and actually marked up where we're going to need to do something. So we can see actions in the project in the context of what they relate to in a standard. So this is a special case of a project. It's an implementation of a standard. But what we're able to do is take one structure and apply a plan over the top of that. So we can say section 2 here, chapter 3, section 2, we're going to need to do something, and this is what we're going to need to do. Here's a task. We can mark this up as a task, and we can then see those tasks separately. So at a high level, so zoom out so you can't actually read it, you can see that there's tons of information about GDPR here. There's all the detail you will ever need to know. That's the standard itself. And embedded in that, little jewels embedded in here, are actions. So we're able to mark up a different structure with actions, but we can then see, if I turn on the menu here, if we go to the tag view, we can see this map in a completely different light. This is effectively doing a query on it and saying, just show me the status of tasks in this map. So we're turning away from the picture of it as a massive structure of a GDPR specification. We're just saying, embedded in that somewhere, stuff we need to do, just show me where we are with that. So we're now viewing this map and just viewing the items that have been tagged up as tasks, and we can see what they are. So if this task gets unblocked, we might have done it, we can move it to a different column. That changes the coding on that topic, and we can work with this picture, this single project picture, in a lot of different ways. We can manipulate it from different directions. So that's an example of an agile project. We could do the same kind of thing with a waterfall project. Show some of the other aspects of that. So here we have something similar, an extract from a standard. We've marked it up with actions. So in this tree here, we've if I can find one, we've identified some things that we need to do. And again, we can view that in any number of ways. We can view it as a schedule. We can view it as a network of tasks. So I could go to task and click on the Gantt chart and actually see the Gantt chart, which is invisible from any other direction. So if we look at the project as a picture of the GDPR standard, we marked up with tasks, you could never see what the project was out of that. But we could do that with software. We could flip to a Gantt chart view, having marked up some of the things as tasks. We can now see it as a project with a schedule, as opposed to seeing it as a tree of information about the standard or the piece of work or the requirements that we're working on. So these visualizations give you a lot of flexibility. The other things that we've got in here are a picture of the project strategy. So we might have developed a story about why this project is strategically important and what difference it'll make. That'll help people understand where you're headed with it. We've got something that I use in all my maps, an inbox or a car park, and that's a place to drop stuff that you don't know where it fits yet. You've heard something's been mentioned, or an idea came to you, or new piece of information came along. It's always a good idea in these pictures to have somewhere where you can just drop it and you'll find it again and sort it later on. So you'll deal with it. So little inbox there. We've also got meta information. We've got tasks relating to controlling the project itself. So they're not embedded in the implementation. They're part of how we're going to operate the project. So they're project management tasks as opposed to project delivery tasks, but we can put those in the same diagram. We can deal with them in the same way. They can be integrated in terms of the project plan, but separate in terms of viewing the status of the project and how we're operating that. So we're just about at the end now. Let's wrap up. We've been using this piece of mind mapping software all the way through, and hopefully what you've been able to see is the range of different types of concept and information that you can capture and develop and communicate with this sort of tool. Working with these diagrams collaboratively, if you have a group of people looking at these, you get a much better level of discussion. And my experience has been that if you have people talking about something written in a document, you get one kind of level of understanding and discussion. If you put it up on the wall as a diagram where people can point to it, where you're depersonalizing maybe some sensitive issues, you get a much better level of conversation. People can say, actually, now you've put that up there, I don't agree with the order you've got that in, or I don't agree, that belongs over here, or I don't think that's priority. And it's much faster for people to see what the assumptions are and to challenge those and discuss those. You can go from chaos, just an empty page or a page with half a dozen first ideas. You can continually evolve that into something that is meaningful and has actually helped you towards delivery. And you can include a mix of background information, knowledge, tasks, all of these things. So it's a multi-purpose environment. It's pretty alien to people who have grown up with just project management or task management software. It's the process of the visualization where the value is created. So it's not just having a diagram or finding one on a clip art server somewhere and using that. It's actually creating it where you create value and knowledge, and especially creating these collaboratively creates a level of consensus that's really hard to get with written words. So the kind of areas you could use a tool like this are, you could manage a small project delivery end to end. So if it's a small scope project, a couple of 3 people, this may be all you need. You might not need a bigger tool. If it's a bigger project where you've got more formal systems and processes that you need to work with, you could use this to help with scoping and planning. You could use this to help in the early stages of project development of strategies and development of outline plans before you move to a more sophisticated system. It's very quick for prototyping, and what I see a lot with this kind of tool is organizations use it to very quickly prototype and to test ideas before they commit to something that is much more sophisticated and more expensive. This is a very quick way. I did a project some years ago for a big soft drinks company in the States, and they were using it to test the idea of management having a dashboard that they could all agree on. And they hadn't even got to the point where they agreed what it was they would need to be looking at together. So they were able to mock that up, if you like, in a mind mapping software tool, and get to the point where everybody in the room was saying, yes, that's actually going to be helpful. And then they knew what to do to move on to commission a more sophisticated system, a more expensive system. Last point is start planning your project post-mortem day one. It's all going to be in there. The history is going to be in there. The reasons are going to be in there. There's really no need to try and post-rationalize when things go wrong, which they always will. that's the end of the presentation. I hope you found that, well, different at least, maybe useful, maybe might be some things you've not seen before, might be some things that you're really familiar with. So I'm happy to take questions. I'll just stop the screen share for a moment, Viva. Are you hearing me, Viva? I think you're on mute.
Oh, yeah, mute.
Ah,
Oh, wow.
still on mute.
Oh, well done.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Hello, finally. Sorry, my name is Maria.
Oh,
I
sorry.
just wanted to ask, is it possible to integrate other programs such as Excel, Word documents, and things like that into the program, into the mind
Yes.
map program?
Yes, you can do a number of things you can do there. You can import and export to spreadsheets, so you can turn a map into a spreadsheet and vice versa, or you can link to a spreadsheet or arrange in a spreadsheet and have a part of the map dynamically updated from the spreadsheet somewhere else. So you could use it as a dashboard to view a part of a spreadsheet.
Okay, so it has multiple ways to integrate other programs
Yes, yes,
as an automated process.
that's right. And you could also create an outline schedule and export that to Microsoft Project, for example.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, one thing I should have said, I didn't put up the last slide, is if you're interested in the software, before we finish, I'll put up a slide that's got an email address to get more information about it. I'll put it in the chat as well.
I've got one question, and that's, you talked about risk management, low, medium, and high severity. What about Morse code? For when you're doing the design phase, you might want to must have it, and
Yes, yes. I haven't got a map in front of me, but one technique I've used in smaller projects is to imagine the central topic of a map. You have all your detail on the right. On the left-hand side, you list your Moscow headings so that you just have your must, could, should, all those things. And the left-hand side is the part that you can discuss with the stakeholders of the project. That's the part they need to understand. The right-hand side, they don't need to see the detail. That detail is all for you on the implementation side. You can hide all of that and just focus on a list of half a dozen things that are your Moscow headings at the top level for the project. So yes, it's Moscow fits very well with that.
Hello, Nick. Robert Blakemore asked in the chat how the wet breakdown structure relates to the schedule and the other visualizations in the map.
Yeah. Do you want me to share and go back to that, or we'll just talk about it? I can find that map again if you want to have another look at that.
By all means, pull up the screen again. Yeah.
Okay. Move me while I navigate then.
You've got to share. haven't you?
This is the are you seeing the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. They're under hierarchies. Let me go to the actual project. No, let me. What we have. No, I'll go to the breakdown structure because that's the terminology is better. What we've done with this is visualize a work breakdown structure as a hierarchy, and what we're able to do is show all the things at the same level, grouped it horizontally, so we can see what the work packages are. And for example, you can see what deliverable they belong to. You can see which work packages are broken down into what, and each work package can then be broken down into tasks. So at the fourth level down in a visual representation of a work breakdown structure, we can actually start writing task information, and we can link tasks together, we can put dependencies. So actually the top three levels are a normal description of a work breakdown structure. The bottom level is where we actually develop the plan itself. So the actions for a project are in the context of their work package, but they may actually be drawn, they may be related in a different network. So you may have activities that are dependent between work packages, which is less than ideal, but that's what may actually happen. And you may also have extra information associated with the tasks. So one thing I didn't show you was the indexing feature. What you can do is, as well as viewing a map as an image here, as a diagram, you can also have it indexed. So you can have a list of the things that are broken, marked up in the map, and you can very quickly see what's grouped together. So in this index, you can see all your work packages together. They may be spread out in the map, or they may be filtered in the map in such a way that you never see them all together in the diagram, but you can see them in an index as well. So this is yet another view of the same information, but organized by the way things are marked up and the attributes that it's being given. Does that answer the question, do you think?
Can Robert respond in the chat and say if that's
Okay.
answers the question?
I'll just stop so I can see the chat again.
Yes.
Yes, he's responded. Yes, that's
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
There's a question from Enrico, which is, what is your advice if you're faced with some kind of resistance where traditional managers prefer the PowerPoint approach?
Yeah, I'd show them PowerPoint then, because it's not a hill to die on, really. But behind the PowerPoint, you can do all your thinking visually and all your consensus building and breakdowns and analysis and extraction. The thing about mind maps is they are perfect for divergent thinking. You can start at a point and you can explode in all directions and think of more and more ideas, more detail, more influences, more stuff to consider, and that expands very fast. But that thinking, when put on a screen or put on paper, it is really indigestible to anybody else. And if you show somebody a complicated map that says this is our project, I can print it out on 10 sides of A2 if you need it, they're not going to be impressed. What they really want is just a summary. You have to be able to converge again after you've done all the divergent thinking. You have to converge on what the 4 things are that are really important to the stakeholder you're dealing with and what you need to communicate to them. And that's the other half of using a tool like this. It's fantastic for getting into a ton of detail really fast. It's actually more difficult to boil that back down again and say, what are the 3 or 4 things that really matter here? What have we realized? What are our conclusions? But you can do that, and you should do that. So so whatever you do, don't try and impress anyone with a massive amount of information, because they won't know what they're looking at or why you're showing it to them. You have to be able to filter back down just to the important parts when dealing with stakeholders. But that doesn't mean you can't use it. I was banned from using this by one client. I started using this software on their project, and he said he never wanted to see it again. He didn't want to know about it. So of course I continued to use it in the background, but his concern was that there was a lot of knowledge that wasn't accessible to the rest of his team in this map, and that tells you something about the value of a tool like this. And it tells you something about dealing with people who are not expecting to see that amount of stuff.
Nick,
Thanks, Nick.
one question from the BCS London room here. So kind of leading from that, was that because he was used to seeing like project plans as well? And kind of following on from that, would this tool be like a Microsoft project and more?
Yes, I think you have to choose the scope fairly well. These tools, and my manager is not the only product that can do Gantt charts. They haven't got the sophistication of Microsoft projects. So you haven't got things like baselining. You haven't got the ability to deal with very large projects efficiently. It's a bit scary to deal with a very, very large project, but they're great for prototyping. But yes, you can get a Gantt chart out of a plan. But as we said earlier, as we saw, an extracted schedule from a map might be just a part of all the knowledge that's in that diagram, that's in that picture, and all the understanding that's gone behind it. You just take the project plan out as an extracted report, but you don't lose sight of all that information that embedded all of that. And it's really useful to have not just the tasks, but all the background information and context of those tasks to be able to return to.
Okay, no, thank you. And just would it be a way to produce like a plan on a page quite easily? Because that's one of the challenges, kind of going back to the PowerPoint question.
Yes.
You know, a lot of stakeholders, senior management, they like to see a visual plan on a page, but it's always very tedious traditionally to map milestones and tasks from a plan to a slide.
Yes. What you can do, and get a bit technical, but what you can have is a map where you've got a lot of tasks, you've got milestones and summary tasks and stuff like that. So you've got a fairly sophisticated schedule. You could then tag some of those, not all of them, but just some of the points as, if you like, executive level interest. So some of the milestones, some of the top level summaries in a project, you could tag those and then filter that and produce effectively a filtered Gantt chart. So the Gantt chart doesn't show all the detail, it just shows the key points in the project. So you might be able to produce a Gantt chart with just 10 things on it that is enough for senior management to understand what the big picture is and the sort of big timeline of a project without hitting them with all the detail of the project. So you can have, if you like, a multi-layer detail of your project. You could filter it back down and just show a simple summary of what the big lumps of a project are, but produce that as a Gantt chart so they feel confident that it is a schedule rather than just pie in the sky.
So to get to that stage, can you just press a button and say, give me that view? Or do you have to go in and actually filter out everything that's there?
Well, you'd have to identify which bits you wanted to see first. But once you've done that, once you've tagged those, then you can just click on that. You can click on that that marker and say filter by this marker. So it would be a manual job to say which milestones are actually the important ones we need to bring out, or which summaries are the key ones. It
So
won't
if
do
you've
that
got-
automatically.
Yeah, so if you've got 10 things, as Asim said there on one page, would you have to click at each of the 10 in order to get the relevant detail for each of them?
I'm not sure I followed the question. I mean,
Well,
So I think-
what I'm looking at getting
Yeah.
at is
You have
this
to tag
one.
them, I think.
Yeah,
Is that right? You have to tag them,
Yeah,
and once they're tagged, you can just click a button. and
that's
they'll
right. Yeah.
in the view.
Do you want me to try and demo that?
yeah. By all means.
Or did you just want to go home?
No, we're all right. We've got 10 minutes.
I was happy to do that. I'll do that.
Have a go.
I'll have a go. Yeah.
We're simple folk, you see.
Okay. I'll start with an empty map. I'll put 4 things in and make them into tasks, and I'll join them together in a schedule. So we now got they haven't got names, but we've just now got 4 tasks, and we can see that in a Gantt chart. Okay, so far so good. The software is with me so far. Right, what I'm going to do now is just mark a couple of them with a blue flag. So we've got, out of these 4, we've marked 2 as of key interest. So we can right click on that marker and do a quick filter. And with any luck, there's our Gantt chart with just 2 items in it. So that process would enable you to present a really simplified view of a project schedule at a high level.
Yeah, that's really good actually. So as you go along, if you know there's like a level 1 milestone or a level 2 milestone, you tag them as you go along, then it's
That's
just
right. Exactly so, yeah. There were so many things that could have gone wrong in that little demo, you have no idea.
Very good live demo.
No, there's some setup of filtering as well that I just glossed over, but the mind map gods are with me.
Okay.
Any more?
questions? No questions from London HQ.
John, any questions from online audience?
No more questions. Enrico commented that coming from MindNode, XMind, Miro, Mural, that Mind Manager app seems to merge the best features.
They've all got different strengths. Certainly the mind mapping software applications are much more capable than the whiteboarding ones like Miro or Mural. The ability to deal with large amounts of information, filtering, all that kind of stuff, Gantt charts, it is not normally present in whiteboarding apps, but is commonly found in the mind mapping apps, especially the ones that have been mentioned there.
Getting to put that to that
Okay,
link.
thank you very much, Nick. Can you all thank Nick for presenting such a good event today?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure to do this. I just put up the closing slide, which has got the email address of my colleague at MindManage if anybody wants more information about the software itself. She'd be very happy to help you with that. And I put my email address in the chat as well. I'm happy to talk to anybody about any.
Yeah, the good thing is you don't have to have separate Microsoft project and spreadsheets and this and that, different tools. It's all in one, as you can see. He's demonstrated very well everything. You don't have to put all the risk and things like that in the spreadsheet. It's all there.
Yeah.
A lot more easier.
And there's space for all the soft things that people don't think about until it's too late, like strategy and risk and everything else.
Yes, yes. So we really, I think it's a very good mind management with software that I have come across here. Well, thank you very much, Nick, again.